Hi, so this is a video where I'm going to talk to you about where I am, what I'm doing, my business, and how I see the future. It's a new year, 2022. We've had another year of COVID. We've had another year of the pandemic. And by the way, if you're wondering why I haven't shaved, the reason is that I have got it, or I had it. I tested positive maybe a couple of days ago now. I can't quite remember because time has gone very slowly. And then as soon as I tested positive, I of course isolated in my apartment, and I've got people bringing me food and everything, and it's been very boring, but there we go. So I haven't had a shave because there's not much point shaving when you don't see anyone. Not much point showering either. No, I'm joking. I have been showering. So if you're interested, I just had a couple of days feeling like I had a head flu. Really, it was good. I think Omicron doesn't go to your chest, which is good because I'm asthmatic. So it stayed up here, and I had a very had the pain behind my eyes and sore throat, a little bit of a sore throat. I've had worse. I've had much worse flus, but then I was double vaxxed. I hadn't had my booster. I was due to get the booster, and I think it might have been New Year's Eve. It was quite busy in Chiang Mai, everyone was out, and it might have been then that I managed to contract the virus, if that's the correct word. And now we're seeing a lot of lockdowns in Chiang Mai, and I'll come to that now because at the end of last year I was quite positive about the year. I was saying, this pandemic, it's no problem. I can handle it. 2020, I think that's probably my experience in Thailand. It's probably different to yours because Thailand, I think 2020, apart from the brutal lockdown we had right at the beginning, May, June, July 2020, after that, when that got eased, things started to look quite good. The country was open, but it wasn't open to the outside world. And then 2021 comes along, we have the two variants, Delta and now Omicron. It's like death by 1,000 cuts because businesses have been opening, closing, opening again, closing, reopening. And it's really sad to see that some of them, at various stages just give up and go on to something else. And you can see that rippling through the whole of the economy. And I'm sure this has been happening in where you are. I am still positive about 2022 because I do believe that this is the last death throes of the pandemic. Okay, well, we can check this video out in a year's time and see if that's right or not. Although I think at the moment we're going to suffer a few more lockdowns and more outbreaks. I've got a feeling that after this wave, things will get better. Don't quote me on that. So that's my situation. I'm in Chiang Mai in Thailand. I've been here for 7 years working online, and I intend to do the same thing this year as well. It's working for me. Chiang Mai is still very cheap. I earn my money in dollars, which converts very well to the Thai baht. Prices are going up, especially the price of pork. We are getting inflation everywhere, and I think that's set to continue throughout the year, but things will be fine for me as if I continue to do what I've been doing last year, this year with the business as well. However, what I said about the threats and opportunities last year, I want to look at that again because I think that's very interesting. I think it's very interesting to see how the world is changing. There are some decades and decades where nothing appears to happen, but then there are some years where things seem to be happening very quickly, and I want to talk about that. And the first thing I want to talk about is how everyone's life is going online and what that means. We talked about last year how the pandemic forced us to do more online. This was something that had been happening for decades prior to the pandemic, but it was accelerated due to the pandemic, and it's not going to go back. But what does this mean? What does this mean for us as entrepreneurs? And what does it mean for us as citizens of the world? Because I do think it has huge implications So the first thing to say is that people are working online. I've heard figures that in America, most people are working 4 days a week now. People are living more of their life, more of their identity online. You can see this in so many ways. You can see this in the rise of meme stocks on last year, where some company that nobody's ever heard of suddenly has their share price go up by 1,000% because of a Reddit group. And also the January the 6th, 2021 demonstrations in Washington, they were basically concocted online. Choose my words carefully. People who are anti-vax and anti-mask, they are also tribes that are cross-cultural, cross-international boundary, identify together online, and that is having a bearing on society. So these things aren't going to go away. They're going to increase. So we're going to have more disparate tribalism online, which will be built on top of our offline tribalism. And we're going to have to think what that means. What are the threats and opportunities that carries? Another thing I talked about last year was the increase in inequality. The gap between rich and poor has been increasing a lot since 2008. But what's significant is the rate of increase since 2008 and then since the pandemic. And it's not going away. So what you have when you have situations of increased inequality is you have increased social unrest. So you're going to see this more. I could give an example like Kazakhstan. There are problems just about everywhere, really. I mean, Thailand, Burma, Europe, North America, South America. You can see that these stresses are starting to come through. And also, I mentioned tribalism before. I think inequality increases tribalism as well. We've got those two dynamics happening at the same time. You've got the online thing, and then you've got the economic reality of the offline world. Well, it's often online world, really. And then those two things are feeding into each other at the moment, which brings us into a situation that is not like the decades that I knew before. I remember the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. And if you look back at them, especially the 90s, you would say that the economically much more egalitarian, there was less inequality, there was more employment, there was more opportunity. This is a real generalization. There were tough times during the 80s and the 70s, for sure. But I do believe that the times we're moving into now, economically are more challenging. And that's going to make the generations have different outlooks. So the generation above me, the boomers, very pro-establishment generation, because they worked hard, made money and thought, oh, right, this is it, this is life. And the millennials, who are younger than me, are a bit more cynical, but they are also quite pro-establishment as well. However, I think younger people are going to be definitely more anti-establishment. I think we can see this so much, and I think it's really interesting because we haven't seen this for such a long time. New generations come along who will look at the world completely differently to the way that their parents did. This has happened before in history many times, but I don't think I've seen this in my lifetime. An example of younger generation being kind of different to older generations. There's a subreddit called Anti-Work, which is very interesting to look at, which is young Americans who are completely rejecting the American dream of getting jobs. They do work because they have to work, but their experience in the workplace isn't maybe as pleasant as some older generation's experience. I have to say, my experience in the workplace wasn't pleasant either, but that's just the way it was. And so you've got anti-work in America, and you've actually got a similar although I don't know much about this, but there is a subculture in China called laying low, which is similar. They just don't want a part of society. They don't want to get work. I'm expecting new generations to come along with radically new ideas, and they're going to seem crazy to us. But they've put up with a lot, in your formative years. And I'm talking about like anything from when you're being 8 until 28. People are in those generations at the moment. They're going to be looking up at the adults thinking, what on earth have you done? Remember how you felt when you were a kid. How I felt when I was a kid. I had more sympathy for that side of things when I was young. So when I look at the evidence that is in front of kids at the moment, you know what kids are like. They're just going to think that the adults are all stupid and selfish, and it's time to do something radical. I think things are going to happen between the generations that is going to increase tribalism as well. I think a lot of the ideas from the young people are going to be very exciting and very interesting and very relevant. And don't forget about art and culture, because there's going to be loads of kids that have just been locked up at home, witnessing all this failure in society and tribalism. They're going to come out with their own idea about it. I think artistically it's going to be an incredible time, but I also think it's going to be a time of great upheaval coming along. And I'm taking a lot of these ideas from Ray Dalio and Professor Galloway and lots of people who are interested in looking in the global macroeconomic cultural environment that we find ourselves in, and looking back into history and trying to find parallels that we can draw. I could be wrong about all of this. You don't know. I'm just pulling together evidence that I see around me. Well, it's economic and demographic evidence, and it could go in a different way. It's not necessarily going the way I say it's going to go. But I think it's very interesting to look at these trends and ask yourself, are the trends going to continue? And if so, what's going to happen if this trend of putting more of our lives online is going to continue? What's going to happen? Well, it's not. It doesn't look like it's going to slow down to me. The trend of inequality doesn't look like it's going to slow down immediately. With the pandemic, it's being exacerbated. So what does that mean for us? So that's what I'm thinking about. And apart from that, everything is fine. The sun is out in Chiang Mai. It's a beautiful day, and I can't go out there. But in the meantime, from an isolated apartment in central Chiang Mai, my name's Rob Cubban. Thank you very much for listening. I'll see you in the next video.